What's up? Back again, Little Italy. Could you have guessed? Anyway, I wanted to talk about something today more so to see if you guys could relate. Not really trying to teach you anything in today's video. More so just give another term to something that I suspect a lot of you guys might think about. But as usual, I want to put a term to one of these little autistic thoughts to quickly summarize it all, and it's 2-7 pity. So I don't know, can you guess what that's all about? What 2-7 pity is all about? It's kind of in the same field of mob guilt. If you guys recall, we talked about mob guilt, and it's in that same kind of field. A little bit different though, but it's pretty relevant. So 2-7 pity is not just some term for convenience that we'll use amongst ourselves, but you could also strategically use it to avoid an unnecessary confrontation once these words begin to popularize and spread. I've already began seeing some of these words actually catching some traction in other communities. It's been pretty funny because we get such low views, but people gravitate towards these ideas so strongly that it's enough for these ideas to already start spreading. So you could actually eventually, I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually you could start using 2-7 pity as a strategic comeback or reply to avoid an unnecessary confrontation if you ever get beta tested. So like sometimes, if you get beta tested and you don't really feel like assaulting the other person or, escalating things and risking going to jail, here's an alternative for you. It's using 2-7 pity, even if it's inaccurate. But first, obviously, you have to describe exactly what 2-7 pity is. So what is a 2-7, first of all? 2-7 is probabilistically the worst poker hand you can receive. And it's a perfect analogy for the hand you receive in life. All of us, being on this channel, that genetics control, a significant, overwhelming majority of your life. So it's very important you understand what hand you are dealt. And some people, unfortunately, were dealt a 2-7. And, this is something that's not in their control. And that's the most important thing to understand. I once read a Turbo Normie book by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one of the big things he stresses is before you get angry at somebody else, acknowledge the position they're in. Acknowledge both who they are, what kind of person they are, how they became that person, and what kind of circumstances they're dealing with. And it's going to allow you to deal with these kinds of scenarios with a lot more grace. He gave the example, like a genetic determinist example. Yeah, Turbo Normie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, actually had a hard black pill in there, which was crazy because this is such an old book. But he said, if you had grown up in Al Capone's environment and you had Al Capone's same body and mind, same genetics, everything, you would be acting precisely the same way Al Capone did. And that's important to recognize with anyone in life. They don't have to be Al Capone. They could be just anyone. And I find this feeling I get most prominent when dealing with sub-5s, like talking to sub-5s. And not only sub-5s physically, but sub-5s mentally too, IQ cells. I feel a lot of 2-7 pity often. And so that's why I say it's kind of in the field of mob guilt as well. It's a little bit different though. So 2-7 pity, let me give you an example. Let's say somebody who is genetically unfortunate were to give you some mild disrespect in a bar or club environment, like some kind of beta test that isn't too significant. Just the fact that they're a 2-7, the fact that they were given a 2-7 and they're a sub-5, it almost makes you want to, it does make you want to let it slide. It's like, just because you know the truth about genetics, you acknowledge their shortcomings, you acknowledge their facial structure, or if they're in short stature, whatever it is, you acknowledge all these facts, and because you're in the black pill community, because you're aware of all these facts, it makes you feel pity towards them. And sometimes the pity is so significant when it's a 2-7 that it overrides the feeling of being disrespected. So even if that sub 5 were to say some disrespectful shit to you, just because they're a sub 5, it kind of just makes you sigh instead of getting upset. You just feel bad for them because you're thinking, if I was in their shoes, I'd be equally as frustrated with life. Sometimes, I'll just be walking my dog or whatever. Someone might be staring at me, and, I'll give them a smile, and they don't reciprocate the smile. And, I think if I didn't have the knowledge I do, I would, be like, oh, what a fucking asshole, fucking dickhead. But if you acknowledge their genetics, in many cases, you could understand why they're so jaded by life, why they're so frustrated and always upset. You'll see these turbo normies walking around like, man, why are you so upset, bro? It's a beautiful day outside. Bro, do you know the kind of life these sub 5 true cells are living? It's a completely different reality. It's a completely different reality than what you've been accustomed to your entire life. Now, if you were a sub 5 in the past, this is going to increase your likeliness to feel the 2-7 pity. If you had once experienced being a former sub 5, it's very likely you're going to be very sympathetic towards these people. But even if you're not, even if you hadn't been a prior sub 5, just your acknowledgement of the facts might be enough. And to those people, I say bravo. That's even more commendable. But you will also see the opposite, where some people forget where they came from. Some people, former sub 5s, they completely forget about what their life used to be and the difficulties they used to go through due to things that were out of their control. And then let's say they had a growth spurt, like a late double growth spurt or something, or their face just started developing more. And they just kind of forget about how their life used to be beforehand. They don't compare it and contrast it to how other people around them are acting. It's like a high level of self-awareness. And so when I go through life, I see some of these people, and I always feel like, yeah, you feel like that little bit of mob guilt too, which we discussed when we're talking about specific scenarios that might involve a partner of theirs, like look at you a certain way, or even if you're just in the elevator, you feel the mob guilt, so you kind of crouch down a little bit. But 2-7 pity goes a step further in that it's like, even if they do something mildly disrespectful, it's like you just let them slide because you just feel so bad for their genetic makeup. You just feel such pity for what they have to experience on an everyday basis, the kind of life that they're forced to experience. Because do you understand what a true cell is? Do you really understand? It's different than just a regular sub 5. True cell is somebody who, no matter what they're going to do, unless it's some extremely lucky, process of multiple surgeries that don't happen to go wrong, which will in most cases, they're not able to actually escape that. Meanwhile, a regular sub 5, sometimes it's because of something like weight, and they could escape it with some pharmaceutical intervention, like using GLP-3s. But a true cell, it's like, even if they lean down all the way, did all the things they're supposed to do, they're just still cooked. And so when you acknowledge somebody like that, and when I'm walking around here in New York City all the time, I acknowledge it. And this is one thing that, because all the turbo normies, when they criticize us for being lookist and focusing on looks or whatever, they'll do the same thing. But the difference is, we acknowledge the truth and the facts behind it. They just subconsciously act. So they won't add in the pity and the sympathy. They see someone, who looks a little funny, they'll just make jokes, and then they'll condemn other people for talking about looks and all. But us, yeah, we prioritize looks the same way. We see the importance of it the same way, but we like acknowledge their reality. We know what they're going through. So again, 2-7 pity extends beyond just the physical. 2-7 pity also delves into the realms of competency too, and all behavioral genetics. So like IQ is just one example. So like if you bring someone, say you're a boss, right? Like or a manager in charge of hiring people. Let's say you're at a pizzeria manager there, and two of the guys who work there, one of them is very competent, the other one very low IQ, other behavioral traits that are just not up to par. You could tell he's kind of lagging behind in his motor skills. It makes you feel that same kind of 2-7 pity, and it's going to allow you to have that level of patience that's needed to properly deal with him if you aren't going to just fire him. Because like in some environments, especially with like DEI hiring and all, like you can't just fire them always, so you do have to try to deal with them with a level of patience. And you have to understand that they have a mental shortcoming which is beyond the scope of their control. It's something that they're just born that way. And because you feel the 2-7 pity, it's like you're willing to go the extra mile to kind of accept that, they're fucking up a lot. They're spilling drinks and shit. Like, yeah, initially you're going to feel that frustration, but then you acknowledge the 2-7 again, and you're like, man, like I get it. I really fucking get it. And it helps you like deal with these kinds of people with a level of patience. And this is like expressed throughout that normie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie talks about this concept, but he doesn't like put a name on it that can be easily referred back to. So I'm doing that now. This is not some revolutionary thought. It's something we all think about sometimes here and there. Like we recognize people's shortcomings. You ever play, a sport with your retarded second cousin or whatever, and he's like not the most competent, and like you try to throw the football at him and he just can't catch it. You have like a level of patience with him because you know that he's like, So yeah, this 2-7 pity extends in many realms of behavioral genetics as well. It's not just the physical. That's why I say it extends beyond the field of ma guilt. It's a bit broader. Ma guilt is like a more specified version of like the feeling of being humble and almost like feeling bad when you outshine someone a little too hard, but particularly when it comes to your physical genetics, which is not something that's talked about by normies at all. We talk about being humble with like activities. If you're playing sports and you're really fucking good at, like for me, okay, in Muay Thai, when we're sparring, I feel a bit of that feeling when I'm sparring with someone who is kind of new, like they're just a couple months in. I feel like, okay, I got to make sure I don't like absolutely like demolish this guy. You don't do that. You let them, have a couple victories. You let them gain some confidence, jab you a few times, and then you try to teach them like be ready to defend yourself then. But you let them build some confidence and all, and that's just humbleness. That's like humility. But ma guilt is like the specified version of that, where it's just that humility, but particularly when it comes to physical genetics. Especially face, height, and race. So 2-7 pity is a broader term though, which is you essentially just like you might feel the inclination to let people slide more often just because of the fact that you're acknowledging genetic shortcomings, things that are beyond the scope of their control. You're acknowledging that they're dealing with, if someone's looking like they're having a bad day or whatever, people will often say like, oh, you don't know what that person's going through. Like they might have had a bad experience happen to them that day. Well, what about the people who have that experience almost every day because they live that entire life of being a true self? Did you ever think about that? Like that some people really live, they have consecutive days in a row that are consistently like that because of the constant negative reinforcement they're receiving. And so like when these people, like you look at their face, they're a clear true seller sub 5, and they give you like a snarky attitude, like, okay, here's an example. I get my my suits dry cleaned at some place, and there's some, not true sell, but he's like a 4.5, 5, and he's always giving me like, not attitude, but it's just not friendly. It's just not pleasant. And regardless, even though he's always treating me like that, like I just never feel the need to check him on it. I never feel the need to address it and say like, hey man, what's going on? Like why are you always acting like that? I never do that because I acknowledge his situation. I'm like, fuck man, like if I look like that too, I'd probably fucking be acting like that. So yeah, that's 2-7 pity. 2-7 pity. Now how you could use this strategically, once this term gets a little bit of traction, let's say you get beta tested, but it's by somebody who's like genetically inferior. Instead of like name calling them and like seeming like you got jaded by it, like you got emotional about it and like you're gonna call them names back and shit, or even escalating it to physical, instead you can come off like, ah man, like if I had a 2-7, like I'd be acting that way too, my man. And you just keep it rolling. So like, yeah, you take the disrespect, but it's like a way of bypassing the beta test. And he probably won't recognize it in the moment, but like let's say you get clipped or something, like someone clips you and it becomes like a viral clip, like, oh, so-and-so made fun of so-and-so and he did nothing about it, but then like the commenters are all gonna be like, bro, like it's because he felt bad. he pitied him, and that's like a very strategic insult. Pity, especially if it's natural, organic pity. It's like, damn, like some guy comes up to you, he starts making fun of you or whatever, but you're just in a completely different genetic lane. It's like you don't have to stoop down to that level. It's like not necessary at that point. That's why sometimes like these beta tests could be completely like overridden and bypassed by simply acknowledging genetic differences. Like if you're in a position where the person extending themselves to you like says some snarky comment or whatever, just be like, laugh along, like, dude, honestly, like, I get it, 2-7, bro, 2-7. And he'd be like, what, huh, and just keep it pushing, keep it rolling. So let's see, if this Julius Perceiver persona takes off and I end up streaming or some shit, there's gonna be people who are gonna be trying to rage bait me. You know that, right? I know that, and I know that my current behavior is not sustainable for that environment. Right now, I've gotten away with, getting into fights. I've gotten away with being confrontational with people. But if you, get to the level like Clav, where people are strategically trying to rage bait you, to make clips out of you, and then potentially sue you and profit off of you, that's when you have to start developing new strategies, because you got to find another way to bypass the beta test. And then, of course, like the stoic route is like just being completely unfazed by the beta test. But I've explained my thoughts on when I addressed aesthetics weighting in his video, and I explained how we both share very different perspectives because we both have very different genetic makeups. That's why we have completely different perspectives. And his perspective would be like he's not really that bothered by it, but that's just not me, and I can't help that. It's just, it's just how I'm wired. I know if I let certain beta tests slide, it's gonna leave me feeling, very, like, a lot of anguish over the next following days. No matter how much stoicism I study, like, I'm gonna feel like a lot of frustration over those next few days. And that's just, we're all wired differently. Some of you are blessed in that, like, it doesn't bother you. But yeah, this is just how we're all wired a little bit differently, where we all have our own unique differences, and something that doesn't bother you at all might bother me. So yeah, we could see where this goes, and maybe I'll end up using that strategy to diffuse situations instead of just getting into a fight. So yeah, that's 2-7 pity. It's not a complicated thing. It's just acknowledging people's situations, but particularly in terms of their genetic hand. Acknowledging, like, this individual was granted a very bad hand in life, and consequently, you know what, like, I might just let him slide. I'm just gonna let him slide. His life is already so fucked. If I had that genetic makeup too, I'd be bitter as well. I'd be fucking upset too. Remember the Al Capone analogy? That's from Dale Carnegie. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Believe it or not all normie books are trash. That one's got a lot of great advice. I'd encourage you to read it. And it's old too. So yeah, it's 2-7 pity.